Welcome to my channel. This is Face Real Talk. Bring it up. Taboo subjects, controversies, secrets, you name it, challenges. We want to talk about it and bring our faith into it. Hi, welcome to another video. In this video, I'm so excited because I've got an opportunity to interview an Instagram friend, and how we even got to connect. It's so funny. There's a particular Instagrammer that we both follow, and she is quite academic, very articulate, very confident, and can discuss anything that is controversial, can discuss anything that's taboo with such eloquence, with such skill. So what fascinated me was this particular person that I'm going to be talking to today would always comment on her videos, especially when she talked about to do with the male and female kind of roles. So on that, there's a comment that he particularly put, and I think that probably was beginning of 2021 or 2020, somewhere like that. And under the comment, and I just said, oh, I would love to talk to you when I start doing YouTube videos or something like that. And he responded and said, yes, sure. And that was it. So I think I followed him, and then that was it. Bring us to now 2022, and recently he commented on a particular video. Then I remembered that, oh, this is the particular person that I was supposed to speak to. And now I've got a YouTube channel where I do talk about controversial things that are a little bit taboo. For some people, they can be a bit hair-raising, And so I just messaged him and I said, oh, is that opportunity still available? Then he was like, yes, it is. So that's how we got to get the chance to do this video. So anyway, I'm so excited because it's not coming mainly from me. It's now a male perspective, because sometimes we think one size fits all, which I talked about in my last video. And we always hear certain people speak on social media and just, spread all their views. And then we think that everybody thinks like that. But actually what I'm seeing, especially when I see the social media comments from different people, I actually realize that not everybody agrees with everything. Not everybody thinks the same way. And so I brought him on because he'll be discussing, so we discussed things like feminism, we discussed masculinity, and we also discussed toxic masculinity, a phrase that we see being thrown around a lot lately on social media. We go into the whole topic of men as providers, and we talk a little bit about gender roles. We do touch on submission and touch on emotional intelligence. Then we do a little bit of a discussion on male ego, character, and respect. So I encourage you to watch till the end, because at the end is where he dropped a gem and he talked about the male code. You might be wondering what that is, but the male code, to me, I felt was really beneficial, because to hear it from a man, and when you see him speak and you kind of hear the type of person he is, and he still gives you this wisdom, I call it wisdom, I felt that that was something that's very beneficial, especially to us ladies, me included, to know that, oh, if there's a male code, if we are aware of it and we practice it, then we can actually have better and more fulfilling relationships. So I encourage you to watch till the end. And so right now, get yourself comfortable so that you can really listen and hear one or two things that could be of, and some might be like, but all I encourage you is just have an open mind and an open heart, as you will learn one or two things. Hi, Ayveel, how are you?
I'm well. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to do this question and answer, really. And to be fair, I was fascinated because you follow for Harriet, who I consider quite, quite, she's quite articulate,
Uh-huh.
and she's also quite a speaker in, I don't know, is she feminist or?
She's definitely feminist.
Is she? And it's quite
Yeah.
interesting to see a man who follows a feminist.
Yeah, I think it's so important to, to basically get first, thank you for having me as well. I think it's so important to get uh, a wide view perspective, on the world, and you got to do it from all angles.
Okay, no, that's quite interesting. This topic of this word feminist, I think it's quite controversial.
Right. It is.
Because I'm sure you know Candice Owens.
Yes.
Yes,
Oh,
and she's very much, to be fair, I can't say I'm feminist. The reason being because I've seen the latter end of feminists and some of the things that they believe, and I don't really believe in a world whereby you don't need men, and I believe in balance.
right.
I believe in mutuality. So, but then I understand that there's struggles that men face and women face, right?
Yeah.
And I've seen the struggle that women have gone through to get where we are now. And it seems like this is an ongoing issue. I mean, what are your views on that?
Yeah, it definitely is an ongoing issue. So I think I would start with like what my definition of what a feminist is. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
my definition of what a feminist is a person who believes in the equality of women in our world.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so a person who is actively pursuing equality for women in the world. Now, with feminists, just like anything, politics, religion, there are extreme views. There are people who are way to the left and people who are way to the right, people who do crazy stuff on both sides. And I think as a society, we always get away from this viewpoint of moderation of like what exactly is a feminist, not necessarily a person who says I don't need men, I don't want a man, I don't need a man ever, or this person who's like you must depend on a man, you must submit to a man, you must uh, bow down to a man. It's like, well, neither of those is what most people actually believe. Most people just actually deal right in the middle. They want balance, and those viewpoints typically get drowned out because the people on the left and the people on the right, just like American politics, they have the loudest voices. They may be by far fewer in number, but they have the loudest voices, so you hear about that more.
Mm-hmm. Okay, wow, that's a that's a brilliant definition. And I love that it's coming from you being a man, because I think it's interesting when you bring your perspective as opposed to a woman, because I think we all have an unconscious bias, which, as you're talking about the people who are far to the left or far to the right, when I hear a man who's very much anti certain things, that uh, allow women equal rights, sometimes I know I have an unconscious bias towards him because he's a man speaking, right? But it's so on the other hand, really, it's nice to hear a man who's actually speaking and understanding what actually equality for women means and what it stands, what it should, what it's, a man who understands what it stands for. I'm getting muddled up with my words. Yes. Anyway, I don't know if you saw that video by TD Jakes.
I did.
Interesting topic. And
Very cringe.
I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
So of course I'm in the city of Dallas here
Mm-hmm.
in Texas in the United States of America. And TD Jakes is in Dallas, Texas as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my thoughts on the video, I would say first, I listen to TD Jakes every once in a while, listen to him for 25 years. And I've been to the church and everything, and his viewpoints, they just really, really made me cringe. Um, and the reason why they really, really made me cringe is TD Jakes built his ministry on the backs of women. Um, 1996, when Women Die or Lose first started, I believe it was 1996. Um, that was a conference for women who were educated, women who had money, women who had resources. We'll just say resources came to Atlanta to hear this conference, and they packed out, I believe it was the Georgia Dome. And this is why we know who TD Jakes is in 2022, basically 20, 30 years later, because of women. And so for him to say women are becoming men, which has now become, which is basically code for, oh, women are starting to make too much money. They don't need men for this, and they don't need men for that. And women are, boss chicks and everything. It's too much of that. We need men to lead. For him to say that, it really, really makes me cringe, because it's a slap in the face to, number one, the people who really, really help put you on the map in terms of, notoriety and popularity, and still really, really supported your ministry. Because like when he moved from West Virginia to Dallas, for the first couple years, the Potter's house was probably 70% women. And
Wow.
now, and it was 70% Black women.
Wow.
Because I think when he says these things, most people, he's really, really not talking to all women. He's talking to his audience, and that's an audience of mainly Black women. And so I think for someone of his age and his maturity and his knowledge, because he's a smart guy, he didn't get to where he was, to where he is, without being smart. And you just listen to him speak. He's a really, really smart guy. He's a brilliant guy, excellent businessman. For him to say that, it's just really, really, really a slap in the face, because when you say that to Black women, it's like you're discounting what they've been through, and the journey of Black women, especially here in America, and worldwide as well, but especially here in America, the journey of Black women is very different than other ethnicities. Black women make up 5 to 6% of America, so they are the ethnic, minority. And so their journey, they didn't have to do what white women have had to do over the last 50, 60, 400 years. And so when you say that, it's like you don't realize, and he does realize this, Black women did not have the support of Black men the way that white women have the support of white men. Like a white woman, she can do something here in America. At the end of the day, she gets to go home to a white man with that support system. Black women did not have the support system to go home especially the last 50 years. They didn't have the support system, so they had to go become educated. They had to go start businesses so that they could support their families. And these are the women who use their resources to support you. And now you're telling them that, oh, women are becoming men, all because you don't like the rise of women. It's like, no, Bishop Jakes, that's wrong.
That's quite interesting coming from a man. Do you know what's so interesting about his? I listened to his sermon as well, because I'm from Africa. I'm from a country called Zimbabwe. Our society is a patriarchal society. It took, I mean, there was a time where if you're married and if your husband dies, you have no right to anything that belonged to both of you as a couple.
Oh, wow.
Until there was a film that they did, and then they talked about how it's important that the legacy of the man is left to his wife and children.
Wow.
It was that strong. But you find that, because I've been living in the Western world, I've been living in England now for years, the rhetoric that TD Jakes was talking about is very common in African men. That once a woman's got money, once she's providing for herself, she's like a man and she doesn't need you. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
and I don't know. I don't even know what to say, because the thing is, like, what do men need? What do they need? Is it just they need to just provide, or and then they feel that they're men? What is it? What is it that makes them so unhappy about that?
Yeah, I think men need more than the status of being a provider. I think what we're initially taught, our orientation, probably in all aspects of, of being a man or a boy, is that, we teach males to be providers, and so we grow with that perspective of, I have to be a provider. And what happens is, it's not that you can provide, it's that you actually need a whole lot more than that. And that's why you have a lot of men who never went to therapy, who, a lot of times lack emotional intelligence. They they need more than that. And so after they become provider, they still feel like there's something missing. Because I've grown up, like that myself, even as the child of a single mother. I've grown up believing that, okay, I have to be a provider. Like, I'll give you an example. For years, I didn't date because I didn't have money. Like, I was a 24-year-old, and I barely could pay my bills, and I felt like, oh, I can't go out there in the dating world and date because I can't provide for a woman. Which, like, in retrospect, it's like, that's really, really backwards, because when I go on a date, a woman isn't asking me to provide for her. If she's a gold digger, of course she wants to be provided for. But she's not asking me to provide for her. She's asking for a whole lot more. And so as men, we also want a whole lot more than being a provider, but we're not vocal about that because we're really, really not in touch with what else we need. We just want to be seen as the provider, because that's the thing that we feel like we clap for ourselves and other people clap for us. It's like, oh my God, look at him. He bought his wife a nice house, or he bought his wife a nice car. Those are the things that we really, really want to be applauded for. And we still need so much more than that.
Mhm. Wow, that's so interesting that you talked about therapy, you talked about emotional intelligence.
We're kind of all over the place.
Hmm. Those are topics that will be for another day. But yes, no, I understand. But in terms of just, I think the reason why I wanted to speak to you, really, I just want to get your view in terms of like, how does masculinity show up? And like, I've heard these terms, toxic masculinity, and I'm like, okay, so what's masculinity and what's toxic masculinity? And how does it show up?
Yeah, I think it shows up in everything, it's in everything that we do. And I think there's a really, really, really hard line, and then there's a fine line. And sometimes I don't really, really understand the difference between the hard line and the fine line. But for me, it's a really, really, really fine line, because you get to a point to where, I guess I would just start my definition of toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity is, for me, is trying to be a version of a man that you're not supposed to be, and then abusing people and or yourself in order to be this masculine person. So for me, I'm not a big I'm not a macho guy. But sometimes I feel like I have to be this macho guy in the dating world. I feel like I have to be like this macho guy in sometimes my friend groups, or I have to be this macho guy at work. And so if you take this, this macho definition of masculinity, and I'm trying to be that, I'm prone to really, really mess it up. And the reason why I'm trying to be that is because these are the things that I've been taught over the years. And it really, really doesn't matter between like communities and ethnicities, but I've been taught these things over years that I'm supposed to be this. And so it's really, really kind of like this square peg trying to put into a round hole. So if you're trying to put a square peg into a round hole, like, it just doesn't fit. So if it doesn't fit, you're prone to mess it up. And if you mess it up, you can become you're trying to continue to make something fit, you tend to be frustrated, and that's when a lot of abuse happens, from in my perspective.
Mm, okay, yeah, no, that's so interesting. So it's more almost like it takes away true authenticity of oneself. where
Right.
someone has to, it's almost like they start to perform a function and a role that they're basically told is being masculine.
Exactly. And that's when, like, if we go back to, shortly, if we go back to this being a provider. So
Mm-hmm.
now you have a woman who doesn't need you to provide for her, financially. And you're saying, well, this is what I'm supposed to be. And then you get upset because she's like, well, I don't need you to necessarily be a financial provider. I got my own. And so now you're frustrated. And so now that's how we see this play out in the dating world, where you have men, they only really want to go out with women who make less. And that becomes a matter of power and control. Because if you make the money, you feel like you make the decisions. And if you are like obsessed with this power and control, those are leading qualifications for toxic masculinity, is that you just desire power, you desire control. And those are the two words we're not going to say that we desire those things, but subconsciously, those are the things that we want. And those are the things that being a provider typically, give us the luxury of.
Wow. Subconsciously, I love that. It's like
Yes.
that's the driving motivation, the driving factor. Wow, that's so interesting. So my channel, I talk a lot about faith in Jesus and controversial issues. And I think it's it's a difficult topic. It's a difficult question for me to ask, but I'm going to ask it anyway. In the church, which is why Bishop T.D. Jakes could say what he had to say, because church, and he used scripture to say, oh, men are not meant to receive from women, sin entered into the world. And there's so many other verses that are in scripture that kind of demean women and make men superior. And I don't know, when you're growing up as a man and you read those scriptures, I don't know, when you've been in your circles around men and they're just being real and honest, how how does it play out? How do they actually see women? Because
I, I think I think men in church circles typically have a very low view of women. Um, that's just my perspective. I just think it's a low view. It's not a view in which there's mutuality, to where we see each other. We don't see each other as equals. And I'm not saying that. I'm not saying I'm just saying we, as in general. We just don't see each other as equal. We we kind of we put up the importance of gender roles. We talk about biblical definitions of manhood and womanhood, and most men in church circles are not ready to have the conversation, or they are ready to have the conversation. They don't care to have it. They don't care about the conversation of how the Bible, in my opinion, is written from a cultural perspective, so that men would have power and control. Like, I mean, all the scriptures just, they really, really point to, like, a man is he's only supposed to be the pastor. Women can't lead men. I'll just say this from some of the churches that I've been a part of, the evangelical church here in America. Women can't be pastors. They can't preach to men, which is just so weird, because it's like women run kids ministry and they teach boys all day long, but the second they become 18, it's like, oh no, you can't speak to him in terms of learning things, which is just, it just blows my mind. And so I think we have a low view of women, um, because we're really, really obsessed with power and control, and we look for scripture that backs up those things. Like, it's like, submit to your husbands. It's like, we'll talk about submit to your husband. And let me say this, even in church we put on conferences where we teach women on how to be submissive women, but and those conferences are filled with thousands and thousands of women, but you can have a conference for a man on how to teach a man how to be a man, in which there are no conferences on teaching men to be godly men or anything like that. It just really, there's not any conferences like that. And you'll have 100 guys show up. And it's like, well, if the world population is 50% men and 50% women, and you got all these women showing up and this many men showing up, like, what's the problem with that? But on the flip side of that is that you'll have men who talk about, well, I'm supposed to be the head of the house, so I'm supposed to be the leader, I'm supposed to be the king. And he'll use scripture to like prove his point, but he doesn't follow any other scriptures, about sacrificial giving or anything. But that scripture about him having power and control over a woman, he'll use that any day of the week and twice on Sunday.
Oh my gosh. I just love how you're so candid about that, because if you're reminding me of a moment where I had, and we had gone to a conference with a friend of mine, and this friend of mine will vouch for me. Anytime we go to a conference and it's full of women, we tend to go to women's conference, and you're right. The men that will be helping in those conferences is because either he plays an instrument, so they need him to be on a piano or on a guitar, or he's supporting his wife.
Right.
You know what I mean? And the rest will be women. But anyway, the thing is, anytime that they will start talking about submission, I always said, oh my gosh, here we're going to the submission preach again. And I said, why are women coming here being so empowered for godly living, how to submit? I said, and yet none of their husbands ever go and get this teaching for themselves to understand what submission means. I said, and not only that, they hardly go to any teachings about exactly what you said, how to be a godly man, how to love your wife, how
Right.
to navigate challenges, how to be emotionally intelligent. And what do I mean by emotionally intelligent? If they say we've got a soul, what is it comprising of? Your will, your emotions. So if your emotional center is central to your soul and to your will, you can't then deny that part of yourself and also then decide that, oh, I don't need to be emotional. This is actually a different topic I'm talking about now. But yet, when you're angry, you're very good at acknowledging anger, which is also an emotion. I'm like,
Right.
hang on a minute. How come we can be so angry and express our anger at, women or whoever, but then we refuse to acknowledge any other aspects of emotional intelligence? That's like suppressing your true humanity for this, for the same reason that you talked about, trying to show up as masculine.
Right.
And not being your authentic self, but also so that you maintain this power and control. And I mean, I did digress a bit there when I'm talking, but yeah, you are right. There's a mismatch in the level of teaching, in the level of empowerment, and there's a mismatch as well in terms of education. I think women have been pushed, like you said, TD Jakes started pushing women to become, business leaders, and then they've gone that way because they had the support of a prominent male Black man, right?
Right.
But then that was missing from the men, on the men's side. They didn't really get that push to go also and improve themselves in terms of education, business. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And like, if you like, even if you think from that, like you take from that, most girls from an early age are taught this is how to be a wife. In religious backgrounds, at least, they are taught how to be a wife from when they're 4 and 5. Dads have dreams of their daughter getting married. Everybody's teaching them this is how you be a wife. But I promise you, there is nothing that goes on in religious households on how to be a husband. Now, of course, I'm not dealing in absolutes, but men are not taught like how to be a good husband. And so it's like, okay, so you're supposed to be the leader of this, but you're not taught to be this. And so when we arrive like to the dating world, we arrive where women, they know how to be in relationships, and no woman is perfect, but they know how to be in relationships. They know how to be good wives. but then you have men who show up and they don't know how to be good husbands. And so now this is why I think, women are so frustrated in the dating world because you have men who say that they're supposed to be the leader of something, whether, you subscribe to being the leader or whatever, that they're supposed to be the leader of something, but they don't even know how to be the leader in it. Yet they want all the kudos and all the praise, and they want the women to bow down. And it's like, even if she did submit in every way that you say that she should, you're not even good at your job. So it's like, and that's based on, the education that, we are not receiving as men. We're receiving everything as men that reverses this power and control and this toxicity that just really, really, I don't like to use the word sin, but it just really, really points to, a lot of the sinful things in our life, whether that be, pride or selfishness. A lot of that power and control and toxicity points to those things that we don't face, and that, we don't go to therapy for, that we don't, confess to other people in our community so that we can get help for. And so we just really, really, really kind of go in this circle where it's kind of like this circle of death, like that circle of death on the computer. It's just like this circle of death. And it's like, is my computer about to die? Is it about to die? And it's like, yes, you're at like 3%, plug in the charger. And as men, we don't plug in the charger. We just think that we're going to make it based on the fact that it's still circling around. It's like, no, you actually have to put in the charger, the power source, so that you can become like this version of man. Where, because I think we all want to be a better version of a man, or a better version, of ourselves. But in terms of education and knowledge and trying to get there, just like, I just don't see the effort. Like, for years, I didn't pay attention to my own self and my own, like, maybe, and that's why I follow, like you stated earlier, for Harriet, and I follow, a lot of Black feminists, and I read like bell hooks and things like that, because improving my knowledge from the standpoint of how women see the world is very, very vital. I got enough of how men see the world. Like, I have so much of that knowledge. I hear it every single day. I see it at the workplace where, men are leaders and women have bright ideas and they don't necessarily get, any kudos or anything. I got enough of that. Now I need that balance that, that we spoke about earlier.
Wow. Yeah, that is so fascinating, what you were just sharing there. Do you know, I have a theory, and my theory is, I need to find a book maybe on it, or which is, I sometimes think that there is suppressed anger, maybe, or wounding from childhood for men and for women.
Mhm.
So I can imagine a man, maybe because of a few scenarios I've heard, where a man gets angry at his wife for speaking to him a certain way when she didn't come from a place of trying to belittle them or not respect them, but it triggered how their mother spoke to them and
Uh,
how we belittled them as a young boy, and they didn't like it. So we always make inner vows with ourselves. I will never be spoken to like that again
yes, we do.
by a woman. I'll never be treated like that again. I'm a man. So you find situations where the woman can't understand why the man suddenly changed his mood, accused her of not respecting him, and she's like, I didn't mean to. But it is inner wounding. Same thing, there are women who will say to men, I don't need you, I've got my things. But actually, like when you're talking about therapy, everybody, I believe, needs it. Because
Yeah.
when you look back, is it that you really don't need him if you decided to date him? If you decided to be with him? Did you not want him? You know? Yeah, I do. So why don't you need him? What's happened? Oh, they've grown up with an absent father who didn't provide. you know, or they were made to feel if I give you, or maybe they've had a past relationship, if I give you money or if I give you this, then you need me, then I can control you. So again, they're also speaking out of, I don't want to be controlled. So they want to keep their power and their control, right?
Yeah.
And then the man is also thinking, no, I've got to be powerful and be able to control because I don't want the way I was belittled as a boy. And when the two meet, there's a clash.
The great
Because
class.
they're both
Oh,
wounded from something that they didn't even do to each other, but they don't address it. So as you're talking, right, when you mentioned, you know, we don't go for therapy, we've got pride, we've got these issues of selfishness, you name it. It just made me think, wow, yeah, what about if it's the wounding from your childhood that you haven't resolved? It might not be necessarily childhood, maybe your past relationship,
right.
maybe, you know, in your friend circle group, maybe people have laughed at you and reduced you to something that you're not. So you're always trying to prove yourself in a relationship that I'm able, I'm capable, I'm a man, or I'm a woman who can provide for herself, whatever it is that you've experienced. And then you project it onto your new partner or whoever you're with instead of going to deal with it in therapy, where you can leave it, get healing, and come back with what I call emotional mastery, right? And you can speak in a nice way without accusing your partner of anything. Just love each other. I need you because I want you. I choose to be with you as you are. Let's work together as a team.
Yeah,
Let's
and
get together.
and that's why it's so important, I think, like in, you know, in dating relationships, to have those hard conversations and have those hard conversations really early on. You know, the surface level stuff like, you know, what's your favorite color? So what's your favorite movie? You like traveling? Like, okay, you know, maybe ask that on the first date or don't ask that at all. But really, really get before you get into, you know, especially, you know, like an exclusive relationship with someone, ask those questions in terms of like, you know, how were you wounded? Or, you know, what are some of the things that you've healed for? What are some of the things that you've learned and grown from? Because if you don't have those conversations and you enter into like a relationship and you're just really, really blind about, you know, this person's, you know, emotional state and, you know, their childhood, like you are going to be tested and it is going to really, really knock you in your face and you're not going to like it and the other person is not going to like it. So just really, really, I think for me, I've started to have hard conversations because I know there are things about me so where it's like, well, I don't want no woman talking to me this way. And it's like you stated, you know, my mom, you know, she had some words for me as a child. And it's like, I don't ever want to be talked to like that. And I would never talk to my kids like that.
Hmm, hmm. Yeah, no, that's so true. Because it's just something I thought of, like thinking, I wonder if our childhood wounding affects us. So we don't want to receive that from someone that we love. Um, oh, it's saying my internet connection is unstable. Anyway, I have another question to ask. There's
Yes.
something about the male ego. And they always say, even if you make more money as a woman, so I'll give you an example. There's a woman I know, well, quite a few who are very, very wealthy. I'm talking about millionaire status women here in the United Kingdom and some in United States. And they're talking, one of them is talking about how when she first met her partner, she had to hide where she lives. She didn't drive her car on any date because she didn't want him to be intimidated by the fact that she's got money. Right?
Oh
And
my
then
God.
another one here in England was saying how she makes sure that nothing about her is on any profile that shows that she has money because she has found that when she meets men, there's an assumption that she will not respect them. And also, she noticed that it kind of messes up that male ego.
It does. It just Oh, instead of our male ego being like rubbed, it just really, really knocks us off our course. Like the male ego cannot handle a woman who makes more. It just it just can't. And that's one of the reasons why men have to work on, like, divorcing themselves from that ego perspective that they had growing up and that they've been taught, and and everything that kind of like the media reinforces, in terms of the male ego, what we see in the business world. We got to really, really divorce ourselves with that, because it's a different day and age. Like, women are going to have things, and they may have more things than you, and it's okay. It really, really is okay. You don't know if a woman is going to be disrespectful of you until you meet her, until you give her a chance. And to be truthfully honest, women, if a woman's going to be disrespectful, broke women are disrespectful as well. It doesn't matter if you're a millionaire or if you're broke. So it's like, who do you want to be disrespected by? And I'll say this: if a woman disrespects a man, she's most likely disrespecting a man, no matter what he has. That means she's going to be disrespectful. She's not disrespecting you because you're broke, or you're poor, or you have less than her. That's not why she's disrespecting. She's disrespecting you because that's just who she is. That's where disrespect comes from. A lot of times, sometimes it can come from a situation in which you did something, so she disrespected you. But most of the time, it's like, disrespect is a reflection of who that person is, not necessarily you. So it's like, you can have a, I mean, I put it like this: you could be a billionaire man and still get cheated on. It really, really doesn't matter. I think that happened, but in the case of, like, the Google co-founder Sergey Brin, where here's a guy worth $50 billion. He has this wife who basically has nothing. She cheats on him. Like, that's so disrespectful. And it had nothing to do with money. And now they got a divorce.
Oh yes. Oh, there's a lot of in them in celebrity land. We won't even talk about
Exactly.
them.
Like,
But we would hear, oh, she cheated on him with this one, but there's money there, right? Yeah, no, you are right. Oh, wow. Now, when it comes to this male ego, one of the things that I think is a challenge for me, because I've done a lot of personal development. I have done counseling, like to understand just what it is. And one of the things that they always talked about was that the ego, when it comes up, is a protective mechanism. And it's not always for you, because sometimes you're in a place where you're supposed to grow. But if you stay in your ego, so I didn't know, so there's ego in all of us. So for example, when we are all in pride, that's our ego talking. Or I need to protect myself. I will not do that. Or I'm better than this person. It comes from your ego. So when people say, oh, you've got to be careful because men have an ego, so sometimes they're wounded or they struggle when things like this happen to them because of the ego. So you need to stroke the ego. And I'm like, I can't fake it. I can't go to somebody and be like, oh, you were the best and you were the king, just because I want to stroke their ego. How long do I keep the act up for? It's impossible. I can't do that. And I'm like, if they're really, really struggling in an area of insecurity, why can't they just go and speak to someone about it so that they can shift past that ego, instead of staying there and taking that as in, that's who I am? Because I'm no longer myself as well, and I'm tired of pretending. I don't know. I hope you understand what I'm asking.
No,
like,
I
how
definitely
can we
understand.
handle it? Like, every time I hear, especially from the African community, even women will call you and just tell you, oh, we've got to protect the male ego. And I'm like, why are we protecting people
No.
who should have agency over their own lives? especially when it comes to how you feel, what you think, how you then decide to behave. If a woman's not pointing a gun at you to say, I'll shoot you, so you better do this, come on. Like, why would you need to behave in ego? Why can't you just balance yourself and think, you know what? I need to deal with this issue. I don't know. I hope you get what I'm asking.
Yeah, I get what you're saying and what you're asking. I think again, that's really one of the burdens of being a woman, is that you'll also have other women who come behind you and say, "Girl, you just need to stroke his ego. You just just butter him up a little bit and everything to make him feel good," as opposed to there being a community of people saying, hey brother, you really need to work on this, because this is an area where you're kind of you're falling short. It seems as if like you have a lot of pride issues. If there's no one, and I think if there's no one to push men into that, then as men, that's the hill that we'll die on. We will die on the hill of, this is where I am, this is who I am. I'm not supposed to be anybody else. You need to accept me for me, and you need to learn me. And now you need to really condition yourself to be around me. And we just really don't have that as men. And so women start to condition themselves. And like you're saying, that you're having to fake it in order to just get along. It's like, I want peace in my house, I want peace in my marriage. And so now you're faking it. And so now as men, we are receiving what we would see as like peace. But on the flip side of that, you have an emotion where you're not peaceful because you're faking it. But most women are actually not actually speaking up in terms of not being peaceful, because there's such a huge community that says, girl, you just need to do what you got to do to keep your marriage strong. And and it's like, no, this isn't actually healthy for both of us. I'm as a woman, she's faking it. As a man, he's struggling, but he's not actually saying that he's struggling, because he doesn't even realize what he's struggling from. And both of you guys are just really frustrated. But of course, you show up at the family function and you're smiling, you're giggling, and you look like you got the happy marriage.
You nailed it. Perfect. Wow. I
Just
think you've
happens
seen
that
these
way.
scenarios, so you know what I'm talking about.
Uh-huh.
Wow. And you talked about the women. Yes, it's true. There's something like a collective voice. You can't be yourself. You can't be a thinker for yourself and think, you know what, I can't do faking and pretending. And for me as a Christian, I can't do faking and pretending and then be going and praying and saying, God, I'm praying for this. I'm like, no, he already sees my heart. He knows I'm a liar.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. I would rather tell him the truth and, and believe him to fix the broken pieces than for me to attempt to patch things that are already breaking, can't even stay apart, and pretend so that everybody thinks, like you said, smiles and thinks you've got a good relationship. I can't do that. But there's another question I wanted to ask when we're talking about the collective issue. Yes, this is the question. Someone told me there's an unspoken rule for men, which is every man, when you meet each other, you've got to pretend that everything is okay, everything is good. So even though another man, maybe your friend's girlfriend's come and told you an issue that she has with him, and you can acknowledge that it's not good. But when he comes to you, because he's a man, there's a respect that you go, he's a man, he'll handle it himself. When you talked about women will tell each other, oh, just stroke his ego for peace. But there's no one that tells a man. Apparently, this is so common, and that's why most men end up continuing the way they are, because there's a code that you don't break.
Right.
To say, hey, brother, you're being a bit prideful here. I think you need to deal with that. Oh, gosh, I think you are a bit selfish. Maybe you need to deal with that. because it breaks that male bond and code.
It does.
So who's going to speak to the men then? Who's going to
I
do
mean,
it?
I think it gets to a point to where you have the men who speak to the men are the men who have decided to take that step and grow. I'll say for like one of my friend circles, we who are actually all Christian, and they're really, a lot of them are kind of conservative in their thinking, but they're really, really actually really, really good in terms of like, you know, expressing their feelings and their emotions and, you know, marital issues and things, and actually working on issues in which it's very, very, very rare. And so, you know, as a single guy, I'm able to speak to them and say, hey, you know, on the outside looking in, you know, it looks like, you know, you got some pride here, you know, you got some selfishness here, you know, these are some of the things that you need to work on. You have to be really, really, really delicate though. Like, you know, it's like if a woman was going out, you know, to a club and she had on an outfit and she's getting ready with her girls, you know, you could have one of the girls be like, oh girl, you know, no, that does not look good. No, 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 it's too tight right there. They'll say it so loosely and it'll be well received. The girl, you know, the woman goes in there and she changes and they all go out and have a good time. As men, we have to be really, really, really delicate. And it's like for me, like even though I have great relationships with these men, in my mind, I'm like, I'm processing what's the best way for me to say this, to not be, you know, to not overreach, to not, you know, disrespect him, to not make him feel low. And I'm like, it's really, 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 really hard. Like a lot of times if I hear of an issue, I'll write down like, okay, how can I say this? And it's like a whole process of like, how do I get to this man without damaging his ego? Because I know he has it. And if I say something the wrong way, it's not gonna be well received. And you know, it can damage, you know, the friendship, and he can be angry and he can take what I say to him, he can take it home and then take it out on his wife. You know, it's just you got to be really, really, really delicate. And I think as men, we have to be we're delicate, and women they don't have to be delicate. They'll just be like, you know, listen, girl, you're not doing the right thing in your marriage right now. You need to fix it. They're so open, and a lot of times they receive it so well. And it's I don't know. I said a lot.
Wow. Do you know what you've just said there is perfect? Because now I think what you've given us women is that there is actually a way to communicate with men to be heard,
There
right?
is.
Because actually they're very fragile, but they don't come across as fragile. So you've got to make sure that you're not making them hear that belittling or being, you know, being made to feel fragile. Because they're not good. That's if they hear that, they're not going to receive anything else that you're saying.
Right.
Yes, because the protection, the ego will come over, right? So I think that's something that myself I need to learn, because that's not something I know that I've been taught, but it makes sense. And also I think then it leads me to the point where I think maybe they also need to approach therapists to just go and talk to them about how
Definitely.
they feel, instead of staying in that shell of protecting themselves and not actually seeing the bigger picture, you know. So that because I'm always thinking there has to be a way of moving forward,
Right.
and
Right.
there's a way of growing. I think there's I can't remember, there's a guy who used to be a monk but he's not a monk anymore, and he talked about the ego is something that we have to challenge, because if he tells you something, you've got to ask yourself, is that true? Is that still relevant with the way your life is right now? Do you have to still have those belief patterns? Do you still have to think like that and have that mindset? He said, because sometimes it can go against you and against your own growth. So always challenge yourself when something comes to you that's like a mindset, which is like a stronghold that you can't shift past. Ask yourself, as long as it's not something that obviously like scripture, but something like, well, I'm always like this. He's always like, what do you mean you're always like that? Perhaps you told that you said that to yourself 10 years ago.
Right.
Does it still apply now, 10 years later, that you're always like that? Or
It
maybe
probably
you need
doesn't.
to shift and you need to change and you need to be adaptable, malleable, you know. So he talked about that. So that was quite interesting when I heard his speech, from when he used to be a monk. And there's some things that didn't really agree with him. And that's when he had to ask himself questions, and then he decided to leave. And he's no longer a monk. He's not really doing all that Buddhism stuff anymore
Mhm.
because something changed when he started to ask himself questions, you know. Yeah, I think we're almost coming to the end, aren't we?
Oh wow, we are.
So I'm trying to think, is there anything that I could ask you? I'm just going to look at my notes. Yes. Do you have any final words to say? I suppose some of the people that listen to me are female, and just, yeah, I do have men as well that listen. Just something that's, as a Black person, that would leave us more empowered. Yes, there's so much going on in social media. There's things that are preached by famous preachers, you name it. But at the end of the day, we're living our individual lives. We're not living in the lives of whoever is on social media. We're not living in the life of Bishop T.D. Jakes or whoever. So
Right.
what is the way forward when we're dealing with these issues of, you know, gender roles, balance, masculinity, femininity, you name it, the fact that some women earn more than some men. Yeah, what's the way forward that can leave people like in a way, maybe leave them thinking like, is
Well,
that true?
I would say, have your standards and have your values. At the same time, don't tie yourself down to something um, so hard and so permanent. Um, we are we live in a very very diverse world, and things change. Information changes. Um, your knowledge changes, and as those things change, you should change as well. If you become so stuck in one way, you most likely will have some frustration and confusion, because the new you will always probably battle with the old you, and the old you is probably most comfortable. It's the person that you know. It's the person that you've invested a lot of time into. But there's this new version of you that's going to have so much more information. It's going to have a different perspective of things, and it's important to embrace that and also to feed knowledge into that new version of you, because you're going to meet other people in the world, and it's just not even about meeting other people or how you have relationships, but relationships are really really the main reason why we end up having these conversations, because of just the things in which we face on a daily basis, whether it's in the workplace or whether it's church or at home or in our friendship circles. So it's just having a mindset where you are constantly evolving into a newer version of yourself. And it doesn't mean it's drastically different than the old version, but it's just you're going to receive some information probably this week that's like, oh man, I never thought about it this way. In which that happens a lot. It's like I have a 5-year-old car, and I learned something about my car like this week that my cousin taught me. She's like, you should have read the manual book. And I'm like, okay, number one, I don't read manual books. But it's something that I learned about the car that was like really, really, really amazing. I was like, I could have been using this every single day. And now I'm kind of hesitant to use it, even though this is new information, for me. But it's one of those things that it's like it's a value add in my life, and I should probably be using it. And I think as people, we're so resistant to change. Um, because we really really like the comfort, and I do. I love comfort. I love comfort. It's so hard to adapt to getting a new job or making a new friend, I like my old friends. We know each other. I know what jokes I can say around them, what jokes I can't. So I would say be adaptable. And lastly, I would say, give people a chance. Don't just strike people out because they say something wrong, um, or because they say something that you find offensive. Maybe they didn't know it was offensive to you because there are different things that there are different words and phrases that mean different things in different cultures. So be adaptable and give people a chance.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
You're very welcome.
And gosh, and thank you for even waking up. Well, you did say you wake up early anyway,
I wake up early anyways.
but it's just thank you for giving me the time, the first thing in the morning for you before you head off to your jobs just to answer these questions. And you.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much for inviting me on here, into your audience and to your show. I really, really appreciate it.
No, thank you. Well, I am going to leave you and I'm
Yeah, so I wonder how you found that. That was quite interesting. My aim is to try and bring more people to talk on many different things. I mean, Avil is available to talk about more things. If you want him to come, just put a comment and we can get into more topics about different things as well. And when we were sharing some, it's not to say, oh, here are our opinion and take this. It's two human beings, two adult human beings having a truthful, transparent discussion just about what we're hearing and what we think. And, some of the opinions that we have, it doesn't mean that you've got to agree with us. But one thing I know, you will learn one or two things from what we were, discussing. And so I encourage you, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater because there's still something that can be so beneficial to you just by hearing us talk. But I thank you so much for watching, and I encourage you to like, to subscribe to this channel, and to share this video with others because that helps me grow and helps the algorithm know that people actually want to hear this kind of channels and this kind of talk, rhetoric, narrative. So thank you so much, and I will see you with another exciting video for next week. Thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe and to hit the notification bell so you don't miss any new content from this channel. Bye.